You will find our second reading of the scriptures today, the Old Testament, from 1 Kings, chapter 19, verses 1 through 18. And in your sanctuary Bible, pages 404 and 405. Hear the word of the Lord. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "So may the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life like the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." Then he was afraid. He got up and fled for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. He left his servant there, but he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. "It is enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, "Get up and eat." He looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. The angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him, and said, "Get up and eat. Otherwise, the journey will be too much for you." He got up and ate and drank. Then he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. At that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." He said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." Then the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael as king over Aram. Also you shall anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king over Israel, and you shall anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, of Abel-Meholah, as prophet in your place. Whoever escapes from the sword of Hazael, Jehu shall kill, and whoever escapes from the sword of Jehu, Elisha shall kill. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. The grass withers, and the flower fades, but the word of the Lord endures forever. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning and to speak. Thank you for that opportunity. I was thinking of Jeff this morning, and Jeff had informed me that I don't know if he got this opportunity, but he said he may be able to speak in a boat on the Sea of Galilee this morning, or today sometime. So I don't know if he had that opportunity or not. But how special would that be? We had a daughter who lived in Jerusalem for 3 months in 2015. And Ann and I were privileged to visit her there. And so we visited, we loved the old city of Jerusalem, and especially loved the Sea of Galilee and Capernaum, and where Jesus spent a lot of time. I had a fearful moment in Jerusalem. We were riding a camel around the city, and when we came to Ann and I, and when we came to the gate, the Palestinian quarters, the Arab quarters, they have a gate there, and there were some kids out there, and they were hollering at us on this camel. We were on the camel, and they were shouting, and they looked angry. And our guide, who was leading the camel, he kind of talked to them, and at one point he sort of ran after them and chased them away, when suddenly I felt something hit my leg, and I looked down, and one of these little guys had thrown a rock, and it hit my leg, and I just saw it drop to the ground. And later I saw a T-shirt that I could have bought in Jerusalem. It said, "I got stoned in Jerusalem." And I don't think that was probably the definition, but I thought I could have worn that T-shirt. Jeff has been sharing a series of When God Blesses Us. And I just like to tell us this morning that even though we are afraid, that many times, and I titled my sermon, "When We Are Afraid," because we've all experienced fear. But I think we will discover that God is with us in our fears. I still remember as a child coming home with my family late. I was born in Canton, Ohio. We lived in Hartville till I was 5 years old, and moved down here to Guernsey County in 1969. But there were many trips to Hartville and visit Grandpa and Grandma, and we would come home late. We would pretend like we were sleeping, so Dad would carry us up to bed and put us right into bed. But there was an attic door in our bedroom. Now, for kids, attic doors and darkness and all kinds of stuff in the attic can be scary, and it was scary for us sometimes. And I remember that often, before Dad would leave us there, he'd tuck us into bed. We'd say, "Daddy, will you check the attic just to make sure no one's in there?" And if we didn't do it, we would call him back sometimes, and he would check. He would open the door, and he would look in there, and he'd shuffle a couple things around. I don't know what he was doing, pushing a couple suitcases and making a little noise, and then we could go to sleep. But that attic door was scary for us. Here are some ideas that I've taken from the text today. Some tendencies that we have as a result of fear. One of our tendencies may be to run. That's what Elijah did in verse 3. he was afraid and ran, scared. Now, it's interesting that he had just run with supernatural strength in the previous chapter. At the end of chapter 18, he ran in front of a horse and chariot. Supernatural speed in a storm, in a rainstorm. But now, he was running in his own strength, and he was afraid. The distance that he ran supernaturally from Jezreel to Jezreel from Mount Carmel was about 19 or 20 miles. But now he was on a journey, afraid, of approximately 200 to 300 miles over rugged terrain. It's not an easy journey. So that can be one of our responses to fear, is that we run away. We run away. We run scared. Another maybe a result, a tendency we have when we're afraid, is that we long for the good old days. We want to go back to when things were better. We want to go back to the days when it was nice and where God was and where we knew he was and where we thought we could find him and we knew we could find him there. And so I find it interesting here that Elijah is on his way back to Mount Horeb. That's where he's going to, Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai, the place where God showed up in a dramatic and powerful way. And Moses met God there. There's some comparisons here. 40 days and 40 nights, that's how long it took the journey. That's how long Moses was on the mountain, for 40 days and 40 nights. He went into a cave when he arrived. Moses wanted to see God's glory as well, and remember how God put him in the cleft of the rock and let he wanted to see his glory, and he passed by. That phrase is actually used in our text today. The Lord is going to pass by. And so Elijah is longing to experience what Moses experienced, where he knew God would show up in the ways that God showed up. Fire, lightning, longing to see God's glory. And so we can long for the good old days. God met us there. God was with us there. Let's just go back to there, wherever there is. We want the reassurance that the God who met us in the past is enough for this moment, enough to take us into the future. I'm sure many of you have had so many good experiences growing up, places where you met God. And I still remember when I was like maybe 19 years old, it was after a revival service. It was a tent revival with probably 800 to 1,000 people. And afterwards, I went to my friend's house. It wasn't in this community, but he said he's going to a prayer meeting that night, and I went with him to that prayer meeting. He wondered if I wanted to go along, and I said yes. And so my friend and I went with him, and we prayed all night. All night. Oh, there were men there. They were seeking God. There were confessions. Oh, I still remember some of those sins that were confessed that night from those men of God. What a night. What an experience. I remember being on the streets of New York City as a teenager with, witnessing. It took a whole busload of people up there and were there singing on Times Square. And these were good moments. And God met us there. On the way back from there, the people shared testimonies and we sang. And these were just good times. You know, sometimes I also remember just, maybe 12, 15 years ago, sitting in my living room with my children and crying, weeping, because I was like, it seemed like God was calling us to leave our familiar surroundings, to leave. I grew up Mennonite. God was calling us to something else, and it was a fearful time for me, and what's going to happen to my family, and I still remember those moments. We're afraid of the future because we're familiar with the past and how God has showed us there and up there. And can we trust him? Can we trust him for now? Can we trust him for the years to come? Another response we might have from fear is to blame God, which is the passage where Debbie read from Mark 4. Don't you care, God? Don't you care about me? The interesting thing I find in our text today is that God so graciously meets us in our fear. I love how the angels showed up. There's no judgment. There's no judgment. God does not have judgment on Elijah, but the angels show up and he prepares a meal. The scriptures tell us food and water. Food was prepared on hot coals. He took time to prepare the food. It wasn't, let's have some food, It was just, he prepared a meal. The angel prepared food and water because the journey is too much for you. Fear is a hard journey. It is too much for us. But God will give you strength, just like the angel prepared the food and the water, and he went in the strength of that food. Now that's a meal, ladies. 40 days. Wouldn't that be wonderful if you wouldn't have to cook for 40 days because I found out in my journey, and Ann and I have both discovered God's faithfulness. And just as the angels showed up for Elijah, we've had so many people, and I'm sure you have, angels unaware, who speak life to our spirit. We hear them speak. They show up. They give us a call. These angels unaware who meet us along our path. I love the fact that God also engages Elijah in this time of fear by engaging in a conversation. And the conversation consists of a question. Elijah, what are you doing here? In the passage that Deb read for us in Mark 4, Jesus also asks a question. Why are you afraid? Remember the time in Genesis chapter 3 where Adam and Eve are afraid. And God asks the question, where are you? I love the fact that God's first interaction with fear, with man experiencing fear in the book of Genesis, he interacts with them with a question. With a question. Wow. I love that. In the first 4 chapters of Genesis, you will find God asking 7 questions. Now, this is a God who knows everything. This is a God who can tell us exactly what's wrong with us. but he invites us into the conversation with a question. I love the scripture in Genesis where God where Adam, it says he heard the voice of God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. He heard the voice walking. Now the voices of fear are loud voices, right? They're loud. I'm not beautiful. I'm not enough. I can't forgive. These are loud voices. But listen. Can we listen for the question? Maybe that's where we'll find the answer is in the question. Will you be quiet long enough? Will I be quiet long enough to hear the question? What are you doing here? Wow, this doesn't seem like what are you doing here? Where are you? He invites us into the conversation. Verse 11 says he is about to pass by. I love that. He is about to pass by. Let's be ready. He's coming. He's coming. Like Elijah, I think we want miracles. We like the miraculous. We want the dramatic. We want the fire. We want the wind. We want the earthquake. But God shows up in silence. This is passage, our reading from I'm not sure what translation this is, but it says a sheer silence. My translation, I believe, is the NIV, said, in a still small voice. I mentioned the fact that Adam heard the voice walking. The scriptures tell us in John 1, the Word, the voice, became flesh. You know, I think our perceptions of God and who God is and where we will meet him and how we will meet him, right, need to be held loosely. Elijah wanted to go back to where he thought God would be because he was there before. But it specifically says that God was not in the wind. God was not in the earthquake. God was not in the fire. But God was in the question. God was in the still small voice. And I've discovered in my life, and I'm sure many of you have as well, that although the dramatic and the miraculous and what we really think we want, is good. We've experienced it. But the strength of the journey, the strength for our journey comes in the quiet moments, in the still small voice. That's where consistent relationship happens. That's where consistent growth happens. I think part of this salvation that we need to experience and we long for in our lives is that our concept of God and who he is continues to change. We discover more. We discover him ongoing. Keep asking, right? Keep seeking. Grow in grace and in knowledge. It's an increasing knowledge, increasing growth, which translates to salvation and joy that will happen in our lives. The call for Elijah, and my translation said, Go back. Go back. It was a long way. Go back meant going back down through the area where Jezebel was. It meant going all the way. He said, go back to the desert of Damascus. Go back to the wilderness where I have a mission for you. The wilderness of Damascus was a rugged place. And Damascus was in enemy territory. It was the capital of Syria. But I want you to go back there because there's work for you to do, right? There's something for you to do. In fact, I want you to anoint this person and that person. There's other people. In fact, I have 7,000 that have not bowed to Baal. Isn't it something how sometimes we get to thinking that we're the only ones, right? When we discover that God is at work in our world, all over our world, in the lives of our neighbors who don't even go to church. Imagine that. He's at work in people's hearts. Go back to the wilderness. I found it interesting that if Saul, who we now call Paul, was on his way to Damascus when he heard a voice that changed his life forever. And that voice was also in the form of a question. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? The God of questions. That's who he is. Let's let those questions change our lives. Today we're going to take part in communion. I'm looking forward to that. Just a few minutes we'll have the opportunity to do that together. But as Jesus hung on that cross, remember the folks that said, Jesus said, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. I don't know if I pronounced that right. My God, why have you forsaken me? And there were some standing there at the cross who heard him, and they said, he's calling for Elijah. He's calling for Elijah. You see, the people that were, and let's go get him something, some vinegar, and let's get him something to drink. You see, there is a tendency for us to think that, and they said, let's just let him go. Just let him go to see if Elijah will come and save him. Not realizing that the Savior of the world who came to save them was about to die, and he died shortly thereafter. Let's see if he'll save him when they needed saving. It was interesting. We do a little garden down here on 5th Street. We've done that for 11 years, 2014. We went down there to share Jesus, to save. I lose that term like that, people. What we didn't know and what we discovered is that we were the ones that needed saved. Ann and I needed saved. Our concept of who God was needed to change. The ability to see God at work in people's lives all over our county changed us. And we experienced salvation. Now, maybe we're at the foot of the cross, and as we partake in this communion today, together, let us rejoice that the one who saves is saving me, but not only me. Let's not look around and say, well, he sure needs that, or she sure needs that. Let us open up our hearts and allow the God of all creation to ask us a question that may just change us